Okay, we're back. Let's talk a little bit about semester one, the fall semester, and what the notebook or the workbook looks like. I kind of use workbook and notebook interchangeably because this is a document that you end up having to do a lot with, and hopefully also incorporates your notes from our course together. The notebook looks a little something like this. Um, Here's the uh, semester one class. It's called Composer's Toolkit. Um, we'll notice that we have a table of contents first, which shows you what we talk about in our first fall semester together. We start off with music basics, talking about how to read the staff, the rhythm tree, meters, and graphic scores. And of course, how we organize ideas, because that's going to be something that we're interested in as composers quite a bit. We then talk about things like instrumentation and orchestration, otherwise the tone colors of a particular set of instruments, ranges, idiomatic writing, things that are natural to a particular instrument. And during session two, we tend to talk really specifically about the instruments that you write for the reading session. So if our reading session is for violin and piano, we talk a lot in session two about idiomatic writing for both violin and piano. I will say that even if you are someone who plays violin and piano, there's certainly still things to be learned about those instruments that that you might not have thought of even though you play it. And for those of you who don't play the instruments that we're writing for, you'll find that, taking a crash course talking about how to idiomatically write for those particular instruments is going to be really, really helpful in crafting your ideas for the reading session. Um, Going back to our notebook, we're in session three, we talk about what makes a good melody. We talk about how to formulate an idea, a motif, what makes motives and motifs different from one another, and question and answer forms that are really prevalent in pieces of music. Honestly, throughout the entire canon, from Renaissance music up to our 21st century and contemporary works. We quickly kind of gain speed. We talk about how to write an accompaniment, how to develop an idea, uh, and points of manipulation, and I think this is one area that a lot of composers, even, myself, who I'm pretty seasoned at this point, always trying to figure out how to sort of poke and prod my musical ideas once I have them written down. So we talk about techniques for development and variation. I'm sure you are all, flooded with brilliant ideas, but it happens quite a bit that like we get our idea out and then we're kind of like not really sure what to do with it again. So we talk about a good amount about how to develop your ideas. Um, we also talk about how to create contrast. Compositions aren't always just about one singular idea, but multiple ideas. So we talk about like, how to do a little bit of analysis on your original idea, how to create a contrast from that idea, how to potentially incorporate it into a piece, both, an A idea and a B idea together. In session seven, we talk about introductions, endings, and transitions. Transitions are probably one of the hardest part of music to potentially write, getting from one idea to another, although there's a lot of techniques, tried and true techniques that can get you from point A to point B, or theme A to theme B rather. And then we kind of culminated up in our last session together, session eight, talking about process and product. The macro form and how to put all of these pieces together into a piece that could be quite viable for a reading session. And to take a little bit, a further deep dive into the workbook itself, it comes with an instruction page on how to use it. There's exercises that are tiered in different levels. We have level one, that's a beginner level, level two, intermediate level that takes a little bit more time and covers a little bit more in depth of the basics that we talk about in class. And then a level three, that's an advanced level. There's also a level 4 um, that it's kind of set aside or set apart from levels 1 through 3. Um, there are things that should be saved for very last if you happen to have time, in your week between sessions, to kind of do the deepest dive into the topics that we discuss. Um, so here's a look at what, the first session might look like. Level 1 exercises, we talk about identifying key signatures on the staff, identifying pitches. We talk about, of course, we start very basic, but we escalate very quickly from that point forward. As you can see, level 2 exercises are a little bit more about graphic notation. The first question here is, can you create three symbols, lines, or colors to represent sounds? How would you translate them yourself? Use a space below to draw out your ideas. Level 3 exercises that are a little bit more advanced in terms of rhythm. And then, a level 4 exercise that's talking a little bit more about using a set of pitch classes in a particular order. And using that as a point of inspiration for a piece, a small piece, a small miniature. So, this is, just a quick look at session 1. We start off easy, or relatively easy, but we, again, like I said, quickly escalate from that point. I try to hit as many levels as we can. So we have a lot of people who are truly beginners in the class, but also lots of people who have played instruments for multiple years, are part of their school wind band or orchestra programs, or they've been studying music privately. If you found some of the level 1 exercises too basic, but level 4 exercises perhaps too intense, you'd probably be a good fit for the class. A lot of stuff that kind of fits in the middle of the road, but I think it's important that we fill in the gaps in terms of what you potentially haven't learned yet, but also challenge you in fun and unexpected ways. If you're interested in composition, it's probably because you spend a lot of time noodling around with music and sound and organizing sound. And this class is very much geared to helping you make those experimentations a little bit more fruitful. Um, Kind of zipping ahead into a later part of the class, let's take a peek at the notebook again on some of our later topics. So, session 5. This is one of my favorite classes that we have. We talk about development, and musical ideas and how to develop musical ideas. So we have a small suggested musical sample here. That uses what we call a question and answer format. Um, Talking a little bit more in depth about some of the things that we would talk about in a development stage would be about, of course, talking about how a melody is structured first. A one possible formula for creating a melody might be something like question followed by an answer, a repeating question followed by an answer. It could be manipulated, transposed, changed a little bit. Something what I call a continuation, something that creates a lot of tension, that ultimately leads to a climax of a melody, and then is punctuated at the end by a cadence. So once we have a melody, let's say we've got a good melody that's got a strong question and answer relationship. One of the things that we can do to get more out of the melody is to fragment a melody. Isolate just the question and isolate just the answer and do interesting manipulations to them. Some of the things that we as composers that are interested in is like poking and prodding and testing our musical material. So one thing that we can do, there are many compositional techniques that create development, but just to name a few, one thing that we could do if we had a fragment of a melody, like an incomplete section, is we could apply some changes to it. One of those changes might be uh, diminution. Diminution is like taking an idea and making it smaller. Usually it's by half or by 25%, for example. It doesn't have to be. It could be something different than that, and it doesn't always have to be completely even, but diminution or rhythmic diminution, making our idea rhythmically smaller. On the other side of that, we could do something we call rhythmic augmentation. We can make our idea musically longer. Um, or even just portions of our melody longer and shorter to kind of test it. Another technique that we like to see in terms of development is a technique called inversion. Um, Things that go up uh, are instead going to be oriented to go down. So if we have, a melody that starts in a scalar fashion, 1, 2, 3, we're then going to go, 3, 2, 1 in terms of the reverse direction. Um, so what instead goes up in our original will go down in our development. And we can use inversion in a number of kind of parameters, but we typically see inversion in pitch. So if we're thinking about, our melody starts with a big jump up, instead it's going to, start with a big leap down. And that's going to change the contour of our idea quite a bit, but it's also going to give us, more basic materials to potentially play with. Thinking more about development because that's certainly not all you can do. Let's say that you have a musical idea that's, in simple time. A development of that idea could be putting it in asymmetrical time or compound time. If you have your idea, the dee da, it's going along in counts of 2 and 1 and 2, and instead moving it to like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, an idea that's more imbued with a compound meter could be a way of like kind of testing your musical material. Going from a something that sounds like a march to instead something that sounds like a waltz is a means for development. And so these are just, some ideas that we can use to further kind of poke, prod, and investigate our original musical idea and some of the things that we definitely talk about in class. So in a class together, we would use our notebook. We would do some analysis talking about like where the question and answer format for a particular musical example exists. Um, we would review some of the notebook exercises that that I would assign as homework. Homework in the class is definitely optional, although incredibly encouraged because it definitely, we talk about the techniques, the basic techniques in class, and this is your opportunity to get to sort of work out some of those techniques and then share them in our later sessions together. So, for example, this we have a melody, a waltz melody. In this exercise, I suggest writing an 8-bar melody that uses a good question and answer format, potentially making use of some of the things that you see here, whether it be the accompaniment and changing around the melody or changing around both aspects, totally up to you. There's a lot of freedom that happens with these exercises. Other things that are kind of listed here that I think are good tools, like using a sample melody, let's rewrite the answers to the questions. So if this is given to you as a musical question, how do you conclude it with a musical answer? And these are the level 1 exercises here. But they lead you to build your own original examples that you can use in the reading session at the end of the term together. So the level 1 exercise, part 2 is using your own melody. That's something that you'd probably worked on a little bit in the earlier session. Rewrite the answers to the questions. So I've noted, these like same and different labels here below to kind of give you a little bit of grounding in terms of a structure. And then, we talked a little bit about retrograde just now, taking that same kind of idea, your own melody, and retrograding the pitches and the rhythms to create new materials to potentially investigate further in your original work. So And this is just level one. Level two and level three exercises are a little bit more escalated in terms of their difficulty. And as promised, level four uh, is probably the hardest of the exercises, as you notice that there's no example for you to go off of. So you have to create your own example and then follow the prompts from that point forward. So this is a, example, a little bit of like what we would talk about in class. We would, in a class setting together, we might listen to an example together, agree on a melody that we like, and use it to do experimentations on together. Um, Sometimes in class, and it really depends on who all is, in the class itself, but happy to take suggestions from people in the class, especially if they're stuck with their own original work. So if you like to share in class and don't mind having your work be a particular example, you might find that to be a particularly fun and thrilling part of the class, is getting to workshop your ideas alongside of other composers. Um, the last class that we have together, or rather the second to last class, is all about putting the pieces together that you've been doing in the workbook to actually get yourself to a piece at the end of the term, so that we can do a reading session on it. And for the fall, that's, in late November, early December, we're really getting hands-on with your original work. You and I meet to talk about your original piece. You get lots of comments from me about, a lot of times about notation and engraving, how to make your ideas more clear on a piece of paper. Because as a composer, your music is usually something that is on a piece of paper that you are handing to a musician to then further interpret. So clarity of your ideas on paper is one of my big goals for us in our time together, is how do I give you the tools to make your ideas more clear on a piece of paper so that your work can be interpreted in the way that you had expected it to be. Um, so that's semester one. We talk a lot about the nitty-gritty of things, in addition to using structured exercises to arrive at a final composition. The big difference between semester one and semester two is that in semester two, we're still talking about a lot of these basic tools. We still are involved actively with composing and workshopping composing ideas in our class together, but a big focus, which is definitely touched on in the fall semester as well, is talking about points of inspiration. So we talk a lot about underrepresented voices within the current canon, and investigating living composers, or people who are recently deceased, but really, like, we like to talk about people who are currently living and practicing music, and what they do that makes their work kind of stand out, what it is that makes their voice particularly unique. So, if we were talking about development, we would always start the class off by listening to a little bit of music. I'd introduce that composer to you all, and we would talk about a section of the music that corresponds to the class. So if we were listening to a piece by Anne LeBaron, for example, a wonderful composer of operatic works, integrated theater works, if we were to talk about how, she presents a melody and then how she develops that idea, we would use that as a way to pivot into our class discussion. So the class, we meet as a group all together. And according to our schedule, we have an A group and a B group of composers to do small group work together. This is a chance for us to do a little bit more workshopping on your original ideas and carry over the concepts that you learn in class to your own original work. And uh, yeah, I think that it's a especially now that I've taught it for a number of years. It's a well-oiled machine, so to speak. I've spent a lot of time on these resources, and every single year, update them, change them around, make them more current. And I think that even if you've taken this class in the past, you will definitely always learn something new if you wanted to re-sign up for it. So, again, class structured either in 60 or 90 minutes, where if it's a longer class, the last, little bit of time, the last half hour is dedicated to small group work, where the bulk of our time together, the 60 minutes, is spent investigating a lecture topic, talking about how to integrate that lecture topic into your own practice, and doing exercises to really understand that particular lecture topic. Um, we're going to talk a little bit more about the reading session in the next part.